Increased investment in activities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions is vital for achieving the global objective of avoiding catastrophic climate change. Carbon markets can play an important role in promoting such investment, which is why many countries are preparing to actively participate in the carbon market created by Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. But international cooperation under Article 6 can be complex. To address this, the Supporting Preparedness for Article 6 Cooperation (SPARC) program was created. SPARC is developing a toolbox for Article 6 implementation, offering a comprehensive decision support system for governments and the private sector. The SPARC Toolbox initial release consists of 6 guides. Your compass to navigate Article 6. Visit our website to access these valuable resources, find out about other tools, and see the latest developments by SPARC, supporting preparedness for Article 6 cooperation.
Okay, the time is 9:03 and we will be getting started with our webinar now. Good morning to everyone again. Welcome to the second installment of the ICI SPARC program's webinar series. In today's webinar, we will be focusing on the guide, Developing an Article 6 Host Party Institutional Framework. And for this guide, we will delve into the issue of institutional arrangements for Article 6 and learn from experiences of 2 countries that are at the forefront of global efforts to operationalize Article 6, Pakistan and Senegal. We are currently in the morning session where we will hear from our guest speaker from Senegal, and we have one more session of the webinar at 3 p.m. CEST today to suit participants from other time zones as well. We will be hearing from our guest speaker from Pakistan in the afternoon session. A few housekeeping notes before we begin the proceedings of today. Next slide, please. Thank you. This webinar will be recorded and shared on YouTube, and the Article 6 Toolbox guides are available on the SPARC website. Please use the QR code that you see at the bottom to access these guides. One important note, please use the Q&A function. If you toggle to the bottom, you will see it right next to the chat function. Please use the Q&A to raise any questions that you might have during the call. We have dedicated time slots for discussing the questions that you raise using these functions after our speakers' presentations today. And lastly, to help us improve on future webinars, we would request you to please take a 2-minute survey that will be presented at the end of this webinar session for our improvement. With that, I would like to present the SPARC program structure. Supporting Preparedness for Article 6 Cooperation, or SPARC in short, is a 5-year multi-country project that was launched in 2022. The implementation is led by Global Green Growth Initiative, or GGGI, supported by a consortium of partners that consists of the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, the GFA Consulting Group, KPC, and Carbon Limits. This project aims to support countries to increase climate ambition by enhancing readiness of Colombia, Pakistan, Thailand, and Zambia to participate in the international carbon market under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. To achieve this, the project aims to support the governments with policy and regulatory frameworks needed to participate in the markets, along with increasing the private sector's engagement. Next slide, please. The agenda for today's webinar begins with opening remarks from Mr. Thomas Forth and Olga Ghassan-Zadeh, followed by the presentation on the guide content by Benjamin Heras. We will have the first Q&A on the content by Benjamin following these presentations. And as mentioned earlier, please use the Q&A function to raise any questions that you might have on the content. After the Q&A, we will have a presentation by Mbaye Diagne, sharing experiences in developing Senegal's Article 6 institutional framework. And we will end the webinar with the feedback survey and Q&A with our guest speaker. With that, I'm pleased to welcome Thomas Forth from Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Germany, to give his welcoming remarks for today.
So good morning, good day, everyone. Welcome for this webinar on the host country's institutional framework for using Article 6. First of all, I would like to explain a little bit the role of Germany in the carbon market. Maybe the most of you know that Germany and the EU has an NDC for internal achievements, but we are very interested to have a well-functioning international carbon market, which allows host country to play a very active role. And this means for us also that the host country should be in the position to align the international activities on the carbon market with their own national strategy for achieving the NDC targets, for having a trajectory to net zero. And so it is relied on the activities which are taken domestically and could be enhanced by international cooperation and allow for mobilizing potentials in the host country which are not able to achieve without international support. So carbon markets may be one of the crucial tools which could play a role for the host country, but the other one is of course also climate finance in the mitigation area. I think both things sometimes have to be thought together. And I hope with the institutional framework and with other tools we are releasing also this year, the domestic carbon pricing and on the financing and contracting of this, we will finalize the tool set of the Spark program. And we hope very much that these tools are very well discussed with the 4 host countries and with the different participants in the project group. And not only this, we would like also to share our knowledge in form of webinars and through a community of practice where we have outreaches to other countries which are not involved directly in the Spark program. So with this, I would like to hand over to Olga.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you very much to the hosts for the invitation. I was invited as the former chair of Article 6.4 supervisory body, but I'm more delighted that the guest speaker is the former vice chair, Mbaye Diagne. Mbaye, it's absolutely wonderful to see you, and I'm sure that webinar participants will be in very safe hands with him. I was asked to say a few words about the importance of institutional arrangements for countries that are thinking about implementing Article 6. Speaking from experience, having worked on a lot of carbon market projects back in the Kyoto Protocol times, and now helping countries to start thinking about Article 6, I see that the decisions about institutional arrangements are some of the most fundamental ones that a country will need to make. How the institutional structures are set up, how they function, what level of decisions are you making, how does this structure respond to the needs of the host country? These are some of the questions and the issues that will decide how successful a country's Article 6 strategy is. Because you might have wonderful plans, but if the execution is not there, then it would be very hard to realize them. And I'm very glad to see that there are teams of consultants assisting countries to think through these processes, to think what's required. There are different requirements for Article 6.2 and for Article 6.4, this initial report and participation requirements. Just yesterday, Article 6.4 supervisory body published draft report on the roles and responsibilities of host parties that I'm inviting everyone to look into and provide feedback. Just to, I guess, maybe to give you some motivation, there are already, we know there are already countries that have set up their Article 6 frameworks that have started working and implementing projects. So it is doable. Transactions are already happening. And I wish all of the participants best of luck and good work at this webinar, and also good discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga, and thank you, Thomas, as well, for your welcoming remarks and very insightful remarks. Now we can dive into understanding more about the Spark program's toolbox, the Article 6 toolbox. The Article 6 toolbox draws on the consortium's diverse experience in Article 6 activity development to create guidance and tools that can be used in the target countries. The toolbox development will also promote consistency across countries and efficiency in the delivery as well. A core principle will be the adaptability of the toolbox to different scenarios to fit the national conditions over the course of the entire program. The first set of outputs in the Article 6 toolbox are 6 guides that target the fundamental needs of host party governments on the one hand, and activity participants on the other hand. So out of the 6 guides, 3 cater to host party governments, 2 are tailored for activity participants that can be either public or private activity participants. And the one on ambition and transformational change encompasses aspects of both. Next slide, please. But when we refer to the Article 6 toolbox, we don't just refer to the 6 guides. It extends beyond that. Development of training materials, potential tools, and other additional resources to support the capacity building are also planned as part of the toolbox. These could include MAC analysis, developing quantification tools, and additional resources depending on identifying the needs that in our target countries that we presented. At the country level, the project will engage a broad range of stakeholders, including both national and subnational government, the private sector, academia, and the youth from the country to build the enabling environment for carbon trading under Article 6. With that was a brief introduction to the ICI Spark program and the Article 6 toolbox. So without further ado, I would like to invite my colleague Benjamin Heras from Carbon Limits to know more about Guide 3 on institutional arrangements. Benjamin, please.
Well, first of all, thank you to Thomas and Olga for those welcoming words. I think that also set the stage to the conversation we're going to have. Another thing that I want to say is, or basically to thank the authors prepared by my colleague Paula Macias and Randall Spalding-Fetcher, who unfortunately they're located in America, so that makes their connection a bit more difficult in the morning for Europe. But I'm happy to represent them and have the opportunity to share with you some of the great things host party institutional framework for Article 6. So I will begin. Please, as it has been mentioned before, do not forget to just write down your questions in the Q&A section. Happy to go through them. We end the presentation. Okay. Apologies if I'm having some issues with connectivity. If it becomes unbearable, please notify me so we can talk about Guide 3 and the linkages that it has with Guide 2, where I was heavily involved in the development of the Article 6 strategy guidebook. So Guide 3 is on developing a host party institutional framework. The target in host party governance. As we know, institutional framework is crucial for Article 6 strategy. The content of the guide includes Article 6 procedures, institutional options, and issues related to the Article 6 registry. The presentation today is a bit difficult to talk about the whole guide since it's a document that is fairly complete, but also tries to look into a lot of the small little details that countries and host parties will be interested in knowing more about. So to start with, sorry, I don't see the next slide. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Oh, yeah, okay, we're good. So just to give you a quick overview, the institutional framework that we're proposing here is following 4 different phases. It follows analysis, consultation, decision-making, and implementation. And this is very similar to any governmental process aimed at implementing a framework, strategy, or policy. And as well, this is connected to the same structure that we presented during Guide 2. And sort of, you could see in the previous slide how things were connected to each other, how Guide 2 connects to Guide 3. So how Article 6 strategy connects to Article 6 institutional framework. We'll be covering most of the aspects related to the analysis and the implementation phase, and this guide provides the elements that have to be taken into account for the consultation and decision phases in a regulatory process. So now, talking about the slide that we have on screen, which is the authorization, well, the slide identified the key steps that you can see on the left: transfer, accounting, and reporting of mitigation outcomes. For simplicity, in this presentation, we refer to internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs, under the Article 6.2 mechanism of the Paris Agreement. ITMOs can be transferred between the host party and the acquiring party. Activity participants implement mitigation activities and request authorization, and here's when it starts. From this slide, we will make continuous reference to the institutional options that might cover key roles in this process. However, I will explain the roles in the slide, so give me a few minutes before we get into that. The authorization process involves a diligent review of the request to ensure compliance with requirements set by the host party. These requirements, as are more developed and looked in more detail on Guide 2, can cover environmental integrity, compliance with SDGs, compliance with national rules, among others. But that's part of Article 6 strategy, as I mentioned on Guide 2. The recommendation here is to do this review through a technical committee, as it demands a deep analysis requiring expertise and it impacts the NDC. Authorization for. Once the compliance with the requirements or criteria is confirmed, the competent authority that might be an Article 6 executive body issue the authorization, and there should be also an administrator registering information in an Article 6 body or executive body, apologies, we refer to senior staff, as well as, this is something that we will try to explain later. Evaluation of the request is crucial. This work can be simplified if the country establishes positive or negative list of activities that might or we are recommending to establish this at the technical committee level, as this review is deeper than the one done by the Clean Development Mechanism, aimed at checking for sustainable development contributions. As explained previously, we will delve into the institutional option in the coming for the sake of simplicity. Countries might decide to use other institutional options, and the names we show here are just trying to reflect the main role. Another important point that I want to highlight is that the symbology represent different roles and institutions involved in the process. Can you help me with the next slide? Thank you. On transferring
Yes,
roles.
Benjamin, just a small note. Perhaps we are having a bit of connectivity issues with your presentation.
Okay.
Perhaps I can take over for a bit until your connection is better.
Sounds good. Let me try then to connect to other source of internet, and then we can try again.
Thank you, Benjamin, so far for your presentation. Hello,
Thanks.
everyone. I'm back again. So I'll help Benjamin with his presentation until he fixes a few technicalities. So we are on the transfer of ITMOs right now. So the ITMO transfer procedure involves more administrative tasks. It confirms that the authorization criteria and conditions are met before transferring the ITMOs. ITMOs are typically transferred from one account in the host party to another within the acquiring party. The administrative staff manage the Article 6 registry, the databases, and communicate with the activity participants along this process.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, we're experiencing some technical difficulties, I think. So please give us just 1 minute before, so that we can connect our team back to the session. Sorry for that. Bear with us, please.
Marshall, I think I'm back. Can you confirm that my connection is working?
I can hear you. Sounds good for now, Benjamin.
All right.
Maybe
There
you
must
wanna,
be something on in the Nordics.
yeah. Maybe you want to start back at accounting and reporting for everyone.
Yeah, sure thing. And again, apologies for all the connectivity issues. This is what we get with a live stream webinar. But thank you for your patience. So let's continue with accounting and reporting ITMOs. It involves delivering 2 reports periodically. We're talking about an annual and a regular report, which are part of the biannual transparency report, what we call BTR. Just also another note, you're going to see at the bottom of the presentation the main sort of acronyms that we're going to be using and I'm going to be referring to throughout the presentation. So it is essential to ensure the quality of reported information and make necessary adjustments. Host party must subtract reductions that became ITMOs from its national inventory to avoid double counting. So in other words, what we're talking about here is to apply a corresponding adjustment. Administrative tasks include compiling, analyzing, and reporting information, including the application of corresponding adjustments that have to be made at the moment of preparing the biannual transparency report, meaning every 2 years. The participation of a policy body, as shown here, as the coordinator of the overall Article 6 strategy, is also involved in evaluating the strategy's effectiveness periodically and implementing improvements. That's why the last step of this process concludes with this evaluation. Now let's take a look at the key roles and responsibilities. So if you can help me with the next slide. Right, next one. Thank you. As I have mentioned before, the main procedures involve authorization, transfer, accounting, and reporting of mitigation outcomes. Institutional requirements includes roles and responsibilities of institutions implementing Article 6. So as you can see on the screen, there are 3 institutional levels that are proposed. First, we have an Article 6 policy body. This is a high-level decision-making body responsible for coordinating and evaluating Article 6 policy. Because of the nature of the decisions at this level on the Article 6 strategy, countries might decide to assign this at the cabinet or interministerial level. The approach is to involve ministers. We do not need to have ministers involved in every single authorization process, but at the high-level decisions on the strategy. Then we have the Article 6 executive body. This body is responsible for formulating rules and overseeing compliance from activity participants and also auditors. Typically, a ministry overseeing environmental or climate change policy. Again, this is senior staff. They might be involved in tasks several times a year according to authorization requests from activity participants. So just a quick note on sort of the level of effort from each of the different bodies that we're talking about. And the last one is on Article 6 administrator. This is the person or people responsible for daily administrative tasks established at agency or ministry division level. Quick notes, functions that could be outsourced include technical. However, I will focus only on the left side functions while acknowledging the relevance, apologies, of outsourced functions. So next slide. Thank you. Require Article 6 functions. Here we have proposed 3 different levels as we can distinguish between the different roles and activities needed. It doesn't mean, however, that countries necessarily will assign 3 different levels. Some countries might decide to manage this within one single ministry with different departments, or a few ministries and an admin department, or so. I'm just raising the issue that high-level decisions are relevant throughout implementation of Article 6 strategy, and establishing this at the interministerial level might be positive for the overall strategy. What we propose in our approach is to establish an Article 6 policy body that is the one that deals with on approving Article 6 approach and authorization procedure to delegate functions to other bodies as necessary. Then we have the executive body, which is senior staff, authorizing IDMOs, guiding and supervising Article 6 implementation, supervising national market apologies, and rule compliance. And lastly, we have the Article 6 administration that might be established at a division of lead ministry level. They are in charge of registering information in databases, managing the Article 6 registry, executing transfers between registry accounts, prepare initial annual and regular reports, and handle day-to-day functions and communications with activity participants. The next slide is where we're going to start talking about mapping existing roles and capacities. And here on the next slide, we can identify some suitable institutions. Countries can leverage existing capacities and save time and money. Countries don't have to start from scratch. In order to identify appropriate institutions, there are some questions that are provided to identify those institutions for various functions and roles discussed earlier. The institutions responsible for approving national policies like NDC or climate change strategy could potentially serve as the Article 6 policy body. As I mentioned, this role could be established at the interministerial level, and the main function is approval of the Article 6 strategy and its periodic evaluation. Former clean development mechanism designated national authority, or what we call CDM-DNA, or the institution that establishes policies as carbon pricing instruments, could play the role of the Article 6 executive body that is typically at the lead ministry by senior staff. Its main functions is the formulation and oversight of the rules, and its involvement in the Article 6 activities will be several times a year related to authorization request. The admin of this CDM-DNA or UNFCCC focal point could play the role of the Article 6 administrator established at the level of a department or division of the lead ministry, responsible of the daily activities, the management of the registry, as well as the communication with the activity participants. One last clarification that I would like to point out is that designation of institutions is at the discretion of each party, but guidance is provided, of course, as part of our work in Guide 3. Next slide, please. So another important part that we would like to raise, and that is goes in more detail in the guide, is in regards to checking regulatory mandates and institutional capacities, as you can see on the screen. It is essential to ensure no legal or regulatory conflicts arise, laws and mandates establishing powers of identified or potential institutions, and to determine if new regulatory instruments or legal frameworks are needed. In terms of evaluating existing capacities, countries should assess personal capacities within institutions, including skills and training required for Article 6, evaluate adequacy of infrastructure available and the interinstitutional coordination and make a plan accordingly to address gaps and barriers. And then to develop a capacity building plan, we need to think beyond staff training, and here material resources and tools templates for Article 6 implementation. This plan is to ensure readiness to implement Article 6 rules effectively. I think, can we go to the next slide? I'm going to try to cover this fairly quickly as I'm. Next slide, please. So here is on preparing or setting up the institutional framework. And I'm not going to go into much detail, but here what we have presented to you is an example of an organization chart that illustrates the hierarchical structure and roles within the Article 6 strategy, where you can see the different levels of the different bodies that I have just described, the Article 6 policy body, the executive body, and the administrator. And then on the right side, we have the technical committee that offers advice on authorizations and mitigation activities, mostly to the executive bodies. If we go to the next slide. The next slide talks about capacity building plan. And here, without getting into a lot of capacity building as a critical aspect of the strategy development, and it's not just limited to the institutional framework. This slide tries to highlight the several areas that need simultaneous attention for effective strategy implementation. So, for example, authorization criterion, Article 6, engagement with activity participants, including training and tools to meet requirements and generate mitigation outcomes, among several others. There are some aspects as well that are meant for activity participants and also on contractual matters. And these are covered in more extensively in guides 5 and 6 respectively, that talks more, or that their audience are in regards to activity participants in the private sector. And finally, the last slide is on the registry. And here I would like to highlight two important considerations. First, the institutional decision. Yeah, thank you. The institutional decision, meaning that we need to decide who will administer the registry in the first place, and also the registry options, since there are 3 potential options that are discussed in the guide. The first one is to adapt an existing registry to meet the Article 6 requirement FCCC will launch. And the third one is to develop a new domestic registry specifically for Article 6. So again, apologies for all the connectivity issues, but I think I can stop here and then let you take over, Vika. Or Marshall, I don't know how the connection went.
Thank you, Benjamin. And we apologize again on the technical issues. But right now, you should be seeing a poll in front of you with a few questions. And the question is about, have you heard anything new? And if yes, what was it? And we'd like to see what you think about this. And Benjamin, you're still connected. And it's very interesting to see the responses that are coming up. A lot of people feel, I think there's almost equal number of votes for the first 3 answers, which is the key Article 6 procedures, how to identify institutional roles, and how to choose an Article 6 registry. People seem to have learned a lot on all of these. Institutional role seems to be taking the largest vote in this case. What do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I really like the fact that we're seeing live what people is finding new or interesting. Any feedback that you might have on the guide, please go through it, review it, get back to us, tell us if it's useful, if you have find some of the things maybe that require further explanation. We're happy to hear your thoughts and get your feedback. And for nothing, I am a pro. please send us an email and we'll be happy to involve you in the development process or the review process of the guides. Since we're happy to involve some pros in the development of these guides as well.
Yes, definitely. We'd like to identify who are the ones who can help us with this.
Yeah. Because I was wondering, maybe we can go very quickly through the country examples, so I don't take much of the time, and then we listen to the example of Senegal, who I'm very curious to hear more about.
Sounds good, Benjamin. On to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If you can help me with the next slide, please. I'm just gonna go very quickly with some of the examples, and this is really exciting because it not only set the stage for the discussion that we're gonna hear from the presentation that we're gonna hear from Senegal, but it also, I think, will a really good overview at the global scale of some of the examples that we have picked and analyzed so far and what we have found out so far. So it's really, really interesting. So let me show you a bit of the findings that we have had during this study. Can you help me with the next slide? There you go. Okay, so sorry, I think we went a bit far. Okay, so we have selected 5 recent examples of Article 6 frameworks. Look at them and try to find some similarities and differences among them. As you can see, we have Rwanda, Zambia, Tanzania, Cambodia, Zimbabwe, and each one of them have their different documents. And it's really interesting to start with how these documents have different names and different scopes. So we have, for example, Rwanda National Carbon Market Framework. We have guidelines for the submission and evaluation of proposed mitigation activities under Article 6 from Zambia. From Tanzania, we have the Environmental Management Regulations. Cambodia, Operations Manual for the implementation of Article 6 on climate change. And Zimbabwe, Carbon Credit Trading Regulations. So they use different terms, as you can see now on the screen, in part because they have different content. They all cover institutions, as you can see on the right side of the screen. They all cover institutions. Most of them cover procedures. Fewer have a comprehensive strategy. Probably be publicized in different documents or manuals in any case. So the value of this analysis is that countries that do not yet have a clear strategy could find this helpful to guide other decisions, for example, the authorization criteria. We're going to show our initial results of our research just based on published documents, but we'll follow up with more details eventually in the future. So if you can help me with the next slide, please. So I would like to make a disclaimer on this slide, as we can consider it work in progress. Are not always clear about who does what. And this is our first pass based on available documentation, but we're talking to the relevant countries to clarify this further. Countries make different choices, particularly about the degree to which ministries. Rwanda has interministerial body for the higher level policy decisions. Although not shown here, I think there are other countries that have several ministries as part of policy decisions, just others, just the ones that are not here, or basically we didn't go through all of the countries that have an Article 6 strategy. So that's why maybe Rwanda is the only one that shows in this comparison. For other countries, lead ministry for climate handles most of the policy and executive functions. Almost all had a department inside of lead ministry that looks after administrative tasks. It's interesting in that this department takes authorization decisions, while some other countries are also considering this. So this is important since it's already showcasing some streamlined process and trend. We're still working on clarifying some technical inputs. So as I mentioned before, some documents just mention internal expertise in government might draw on additional experts inside or outside of government. We have identified a very important area for future research, which is comparing across countries using a consistent framework and definitions to understand different approaches. So I'll stop here and And I'll let you take over, Vika. I thought that this would be super interesting to leave the discussion to Senegal.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. We have time for a few questions if you're open to that before we move on to Senegal. So first, we have a question on the accounting. So how is accounting done, and can you clarify how and when the corresponding adjustments are made?
Okay, thank you, Vika, for the question. So the core part of accounting is, of course, the application of the corresponding adjustments. So making these adjustments not only or basically requires accurate information that we receive about transfers between accounts, and this information needs to be recorded in a registry. So the application of the corresponding adjustments consists of adding the host body so that the acquiring party can subtract them from its inventory. And what we're trying to accomplish here is to avoid double counting. In this way, the acquiring party, apologies, will be able to use these IDMOs claimed by the host body. So that's sort of the main core aspect of accounting, and why is it so important?
Thank you very much, Benjamin. And you brought up the registry as well. So there was a question about registries, and can the registries that organizations such as the World Bank that have received be used to track Article 6, and what would be sort of required to use them?
Sorry, Vika, my connection was not great. Can you repeat the question?
Sure, no problem. There was a question on the registries that are being developed by the World Bank, and if they can be used in the Article 6 as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. Now I got it. So definitely, as I mentioned, there are different options that country can have when we talk about registries. In particular, the registries that already exist and that can be adopted by countries are the ones developed by the World Bank. So definitely countries can use these registries as long as they have the required functions. So in other words, those are useful, but they might require some adaptations or changes to make sure that it's is working properly. It seems like the World Bank does offer this without a charge, but there's still probability that there's some setup or cost for adapting them. But largely, or the fact that you can access them will be without a cost.
Thank you, Benjamin. One last question that seems to be quite popular in the Q&A right now. And this is about how procedures vary between Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. I know this is a very large question to encompass into a few lines, but if you could say a bit about this.
Yeah, so let me try to be a bit to summarize it somehow on the main differences. But I will say that there are some functions that will be different when we talk about implementation as part of Article 6.4. And the minimum is that there needs to be an approval of transition of CDM projects to 6.4 mechanisms, approved projects and authorized projects participants. And then there are some other additionals that we have identified, for example, to approve country-specific parameters, to use in certain methodologies, develop an accreditation standard, accredit auditors, register activities, and develop methodologies. So those are some of the examples of the key differences that we can perceive between 6.2 and 6.4 implementation.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for taking the time to make the presentation. And I'll also like to thank our participants for asking such interesting questions. Please continue to use the Q&A function to raise any questions that you might have. Thank you, Benjamin. It's now time for our next session with our guest speaker for the day. We are very happy to have Mbaye with us today. He's the Director General of Afrique Energy Environment, and he's also the former president of the COMNAC, or the Senegalese National Board on Climate Change. We're very happy to have you here. Please take it away.
Thank you, Vika. As you said, I'm Mbaye Diagne from Senegal, and I am still member of the National Climate Change Committee. And within that committee, I chair the subcommittee addressing carbon market and climate finance. Thank you for this invitation on behalf of the Ministry of Environment. Just to clarify for Senegal why we thought it was necessary to develop a strategy on Article 6 is because we first clearly stated in our NDC that we will use carbon market to meet our NDC and our climate change goals. Second, we were involved in the CDM, both with some ministry agencies, government agencies, but also with private sectors. We also had a lot of NGOs involved in the voluntary markets. So when the Article 6 was adopted, we saw that we were approached Senegal through the ministry. We were approached by many entities, including ministries, including some countries like Switzerland, like Japan. We were approached to have cooperation on carbon market. But at the same time, many entities, private entities, companies were coming to the ministry to request authorization, approval for project in relation to Article 6. And some others went to other ministries, other line ministries, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Forestry, and all those ministries. So at that point, because in Senegal, as I said, we have a National Climate Change Committee where you have the line ministries, we have private sector, NGOs, and all stakeholders around climate change, but under the Ministry of Environment. So that committee considered it's necessary to have a break and see what's going on, how to address all those requests coming from countries, coming from individuals, coming from companies, coming from many entities in relation to different requests. Some were having bilateral agreement, as I said, some others in the compliance market, some others in the voluntary market, and it was not very clear. So at that point, this committee under the Ministry of Environment requested GGGI a support to develop a strategy, because we consider that before going in all those requests, we need to have a very clear idea on what we want, how we want to use the Article 6, what is the objective, how it is aligned with our NDC, how it can contribute to meeting our NDC as well as our climate policies. So it's why we get that support and we develop this strategy where we address all elements already raised by our previous speakers. And in that strategy, we clearly integrate all types of carbon markets, because we consider that the institutional framework we wanted to set up, as well as the governance of the carbon market, need to be in the same umbrella, whether it is the Article 6.4, whether it's about Article 6.2 through bilateral agreements, whether it will be voluntary carbon market, whether it will be the aviation, CORSIA. So we made a proposal to have the same umbrella addressing all those type of markets, but having different steps for each type of market, whether it is the 6.4, the 6.2, the voluntary carbon market, or other international mitigation purposes like the CORSIA. We have different steps to be followed by the project proponent, as well as this different step for approval, as well as authorizations. So, but also I forgot to say that we built our strategy and all the institutional framework, as well as the governance, on the existing ones we already had, because we had already under the CDM, we had a CDM bureau with a DNA, with technical committees, and also we had the opportunity to work with the World Bank to set up a standardized crediting framework. It was before the Article 6 was adopted. We had a pilot with Rwanda to set up this framework. So we built, based on that CDM bureau and the standardized crediting framework, to set up this Article 6 institutional framework, as well as the governance. And as said by the previous speakers, we have a steering committee under the ministry, at the level of the Ministry of the Environment, the cabinet of the ministry, but which also involve some other ministries, mainly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Finance. Because through the bilateral cooperation, some partners wanted to get the Ministry of Foreign Affairs being involved. And also in some agencies, as well as for some ministries, we wanted to have the Ministry of Finance being involved. It's why we have this steering committee under the Ministry of Environment, but involving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Finance, and also having a flexibility to invite any other line ministry. Because in some bilateral agreements, like with Norway, we invited the Ministry of Energy. So this is the level of the steering committee. And also we had an administrator, we call it the bureau, the Carbon Market Bureau, under the Directorate of Climate Change, which is also the Article 6 DNA, as well as the CDM DNA. And it's where all the administrative procedures, all the secretariat task is done. And that bureau is supported by technical committee. And the technical committee will come from the National Climate Change Committee, where we have technical specialized committee that will support this bureau. It's like what was presented here by Spark is what we have. And as I said, we had at the same time many bilateral agreements. We have one with Switzerland. We at the project and program level. We have one with Norway at the policy level. We have one with Singapore, and we have at the project level. We have one with Japan at the project and program level, and we are discussing with Korea for another one. And all those bilateral agreements and all those procedures will be integrated in the same institutional framework, as well as the same governance, bearing in mind that the step may be different, the requirement in technical capacity may be different, because in the case of Japan, you need to approve methodology, you need to issue to validate project, you need to issue units, and to authorize the transfer. While for some others, you use existing standards, you just approve activities and authorization of ITMOs. Depending to the type of bilateral agreement, the different step will be different. When it comes also to 6.4, the step may be different because you can have some technical activities involving methodologies, involving crediting period, involving the relationship with the NDC. There are many other elements. So, but we build all the institutional framework as well as the governance to be able to be enough flexible to meet any type of cooperation. And what I can say, and after that, we prepare the regulation. And the first regulation was to set up a decree at the ministerial level. And now we are trying to convert it at an interministerial level to set up all that institutional framework in a regularity document, and also to nominate officially the people that will be involved in those activities. And for the implementation of all that strategy, we had the opportunity to benefit from the World Bank through the Partnership for Market Implementation, PMI, support first to develop the operational manual, all the different procedures, all the different activities, and procedures for each step of each activity. Also, we, under that support with the World Bank, we are developing the marginal abatement cost, because to define the activities, to take decisions, people will need to have a very clear view on the impact of any transfer in the NDC. So we have a support from the World Bank to develop for the technology we plan to use in our NDC and the projects we will have under the Article 6 to have the marginal abatement cost of all type of technologies and projects. At the same time, in this support under the PMI, we are also developing all the MRV system, because as you know, and as is already said, under the Article 6, there will be a very comprehensive and very robust MRV system. You need to record all activities. You need to report all ITMO transactions, and you need to submit initial reports. You need to submit annual report as well as annex of the biennial transparency report under Article 6. And all of that, we need to set up the organization as well as the infrastructure to be able to do all that, those reporting. Under the PMI also, we have this linkage of the MRV under the Article 6 with the national MRV, because the MRV on Article 6 needs to be linked to the BTR, the MRV of the NDC. So we need to have that linkage. And as said by the previous speaker also, you need to have a regular inventory. Because as you know, in our countries, we prepare our national inventory based on projects with the support of consultants. But if we want to participate effectively in Article 6, we need to have the regular inventory to be able to do the corresponding adjustment. Because to do the corresponding adjustment, you need first to have the inventory. And we need to set up a permanent system to provide annually the inventory, to be able to do the corresponding adjustment and provide the emission balance and ensure there is no double counting. And the corresponding adjustment is done for all ITMO transfer under the Article 6. That were the main elements that are linked to this project. It's a very big project with PMI. As I said, working on the manual to operationalize the strategy, working on the MRV, and also working on the registry, because also you need to track all the ITMOs and to track them through a registry. It's a requirement to participate in Article 6.2. So also the PMI is supporting Senegal to develop or use the World Bank registry. But above all of that, we found that there is a very huge need of capacity building. And a capacity building, general one for all stakeholders, but very specific capacity building depending to the different type of actors. You need to have a very specific capacity building for members of the steering committee, because they are the ones that will approve the bilateral agreements, that are the ones that will update the strategy and approve the update of the strategy, that are the ones that will at a very high level take some decisions when it comes to authorization. You need also to build the capacity of the technical committee, because they have to go in depth in some technical elements to ensure that the transfer of international mitigation outcome will not impact negatively the ability to meet our NDC. You need also to build the capacity of the users, meaning the different agencies, the private sector, as well as the line ministries. So there is a need for very huge program of capacity building for different actors with different components of that capacity building. That is in general what I can say, and open to any question in relation to the capacity, the strategy we have set up for Senegal and its implementation currently ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mbaye. That was a really good presentation, and we got to learn a lot from your first-hand experience. Before we move into the Q&A with you, just a note for our participants. We are going to send you the link to our feedback survey in the chat. It would be great if you could take a minute to fill it out before you sign off for today. And as mentioned earlier, please use the Q&A function to ask any questions that you might have that we will take now. Mr. Mbaye, I think your presentation was very concise, and we got to learn a lot about the lead ministries and other line ministries who help be a part of the institutional framework. But could you tell us a bit about what role the private sector has played in this process?
Yes, the private sector, when developing the strategy, we involve a very large consultation with all actors, including the private sector, because the private sector was one of the actors that are developing projects. They were involved in the CDM, and one of their main concerns was what to do with the existing CDM project. How can we involve in the cooperation you are having with other actors, and how the corresponding adjustment will affect us? Will we pay something to participate? What will be our contribution the ministry will request when participating? will we contribute to adaptation? Will we contribute financially in participating, because there will be a corresponding adjustment to be done? How can we ensure that we will get the authorization if we have a project before we start it? What are the confidence and all of that? And also they wanted to better understand the difference between the existing market, meaning the CDM and the voluntary carbon market, and the Article 6. The main difference, what impact that will have from their side in terms of price, in terms of units, and all of that. So we involved them in all the decision to be and the orientation to be proposed in the strategy, as well as in the institutional framework. And they are also part of this National Climate Change Committee, which will support the Bureau, the Article 6 Bureau, in doing all the assessment. They will be part of that, they are represented. But also they request and continue to request to have a very robust capacity building to enable them to identify in what market to go, whether they will go under 6.4 or 6.2, in 6.2 in what bilateral agreement, or do they need to go in the voluntary carbon market? They have very large questions, and we are doing continuous capacity building with the support of GGGI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbaye. And like you mentioned, this just highlights the importance of capacity building for all the stakeholders involved in the process. Thank you for that. There is one more question that was raised in the Q&A. When do we expect Senegal's Article 6 framework to be ready?
Yes, currently we already have the decree to set up the institutional framework as well as the governance, just at the final stage, because we had these elections, we have changed minister and all of that, delay a bit the process, but we will have it. That is just the decree that give the legal framework. But it's not because we have it that will be operational, because we need to have this operational manual that will detail all the procedures in all steps of the activity cycle. The World Bank, as I said, is supporting us under the PMI. A consultant was hired. They have already provided a first draft, and we have this global consultation with all stakeholders for the validation of this manual. And it's only after we validate the manual and get this final document be signed to have the legal setup of this institutional framework as well as the governance system that we will start. But in parallel, we are still continuing to work because we already have the bilateral agreement. We, in parallel, have identified some projects, and the projects some of them are under implementation. We will not wait until all is ready to start. We have, at the same time, have ad hoc procedures to start with some project that will inform us also in finalizing what we are trying to do. And we have a project on biogas digesters as well as in the waste sector. And we have another one in the energy sector with the Switzerland cooperation. And we are identifying some project also under the cooperation with Japan. So we are in parallel doing all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbaye. And we're looking forward to seeing the follow-up and updates on this.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you very much for your time to speak with us today and wish you good luck.
Thank you.
And to all our participants as well, thank you for joining, and please follow the Spark website for updates on the guides and to access the guides that have been published so far. We hope to see you in our future webinars as part of the Spark program, and thank you and have a nice day.